Hi, today I want to talk a little bit about wefts before I demonstrate my weaving. Um, we are so used to gems, at least the people I know and the people I have taught. Uh, Gems fingering was our preferred wefts. And, excuse me. So it was superfine merino, Loette gems, fingering weight, and we loved it. But they have stopped making it. So I have always kept my eyes open for wefts and colors that could be useful for my weaving. So every place I go, whenever I've been in a city, a new city, I go into the telephone book or the directory or Google and find out where their yarn stores are. And and then I go there and search for yarns that could be used for me. So now that Gems is discontinuing, or Loette is discontinuing their Gems series, it's more of a important thing to do for us is to search for wefts that we will feel comfortable using. So I wanted to talk to you about that, about the wefts. Like I say, I'm always in search of yarns. And for the Naheen weaver, we use different weight yarn. But I want to talk about the ancestors. Now here is, this is quite a large yarn. I wouldn't use it, but I love the color. So when I go into a store, and I'm choosing this one because it's large and hopefully you can see this, but when I go into a store and I'm searching for the wefts, I always want to make sure that they're 2-ply. So I untwist them a little bit and then divide those plies. And if there's 2, then I'm very happy with it. So there's the 2-ply. So Gems was a 2-ply merino wool. This happens to be a wool that was sheep fleece from Alberta. Anyway, so I'm always searching for 2-ply because that's what our ancestors did. They created a 2-ply for the wefts. And some people say that they created it the same way as we did and do the warp by thigh spinning, fine mountain goat wool. And now we could do that with the merino wool. But that's what they felt that our wefts were created by, possibly thigh spinning, but possibly also with the drop spindle. But it was always 2-ply. So when I go into the stores, I'm always doing that, on rolling them and making sure that they're 2-ply. And I love the colors. So I'd also like to talk about the colors. We have years ago when I first started, the people up in Cluckwan, I believe it was the Hotch sisters, because they worked so closely with Cheryl Samuel, Cheryl had discovered a factory that had discontinued a particular yarn. And so she got together with some interested people, to invest in purchasing that discontinued yarn and the inventory of the discontinued yarn. Excuse me, I had to go and blow my nose. I'm suffering from tree pollen allergies. Anyway, I was talking about the discontinued yarn factory, and up in Cluckwan, they store stored. They had purchased this inventory from the yarn factory, and then they stored it. They had it up there in Klukwan, and so when I first started weaving, I would order my wefts from them, and they were very good at dyeing the yellow. Actually, the yellow was always individually dyed, and so you had to order a very large amount of the yellow if you wanted it, because you didn't want to run out of the dye lot. But the blues, the Chilkat blue was lovely. The weight of the yarn is important, and merino wool is the preferred wool. It's a lovely wool. It feels good on your hands, and it's got a really nice twist to it. It's not too fluffy. Like here's a nice wool that is a merino wool, and it's about the right weight. But if you really look close at it, let's see if you can see it, it's pretty fluffy. And that fluff stuff is, it's usable, but if it's more of a tight twist in worsted, I believe is what it's called, when you twist tight and it's not so fluffy, like the gems was just so perfect. It's beautiful stuff, but now we can't get it. Also, the twist, like the big stuff that I just showed you, has a twist that actually, that's one of the reasons why I got this, is that whenever I see a Z twisted yarn, I'm like, ooh, whippy. So it's unusual. So I got this because if you see really close, and I don't know if this camera is twisting it around, but it's a Z twisted yarn. Very unusual. So that's why it grabbed my attention. Here's a similar color, and it's a little smaller weight, but you can see it's quite hairy. It's not merino wool. It's a plain sheep's wool, and it has the different twist to it, and it has the commercial S twist to it. So the twist is important, the weight is important, but the two-ply is the most important. So with my project, I'm using the black and the blue, but with your project, you work with what colors you want or what you have on hand. And like I said, the Naheen works with a different weights, and I'm going to be using different weights with that shield. And I hope that if you have one color that is like an average, similar to gems, a 2/6 weight, 2-ply, then if you have a similar color that is a 2/12 weight, a lace weight 2-ply, that's perfect. And then, so if you have black with the regular and the fine, and then another color with the regular and the fine, and then if you have white with the fine, then we're ready for the project. I'm going to weave, and then I'll read a story. I talked about the Tlingit story of the raven traveling. So I'm going to be reading out of the Masset dialect stories that Swanton collected in 1901. Okay? Then the woman was pregnant for a long time, and when she was about to give birth, she was in pain, and he came out of her thigh. Then she used to hold him. Then the child grew up quickly. This was the woman who owned the moon. He had himself born from her because he wanted the moon, and this woman was called Moon Woman. Then the child cried a great deal, and when he cried, he said, "Boo-hoo, moon." Then his mother said, "One talks about a thing beyond his reach, which the supernatural beings own." And when the child cried again, he kept saying, "Boo-hoo, moon, boo-hoo, moon." Then when her mind was tired out with the noise, she stopped up the holes in the house. She stopped up the smoke hole, and she stopped up the small holes as well. Then she untied the strings from the box. Although they were very strong, she untied them. She did this for the moon, which was inside. Then she took the moon out, and she let him play with it. She did not give it to him. She only let him play with it to quiet him. After his mother had gone outside, he took up the moon in his beak, and then he flew about the house with it. After he had transformed himself into a raven, he made himself small, and just before his mother got in, he turned himself into a child, such as he had been before. Then he began playing with the moon, and he began to cry loudly. And when he cried, he said, "Boo-hoo, smoke hole, boo-hoo, smoke hole, boo-hoo, moon, boo-hoo, moon." He said this for a long time, and then he again cried his mother's mind tired, and she opened the smoke hole a little, and then he cried little more, and he kept saying, "Boo-hoo, more," for a long time, and then she made the opening in the smoke hole larger, and he kept saying, "Boo-hoo, more," and he again played with the moon. Raven cried because he wanted the moon, and his mother did not want to give it to him. And then when he cried very much, she made a large opening at the smoke hole. At that time it was dark, therefore he let himself be born for the moon. He did not like the darkness. Then he again played with the moon, and after she had made the opening in the smoke hole larger, his mother went out again. And then he held the moon in his mouth, and he flew through the smoke hole, and he had put the moon under his wing. Then he called like a raven on top of the house with the moon under his arm. Then he made himself into a raven again, and he flew away during the night with the moon under his wing. Then he sat on the bank of Nass River, where they were taking oligans, and it was dark. "Say, if you bring me your spruce needles, I will make it light for you." He called the oligans spruce needles. And he said the same thing again. He said to them, "Say, if you bring me some spruce needles, I'll make it light for you." They said to him, "Say, if you bring me some spruce needles, I'll make it light for you." They said to him, "Say, one who always is talking about something the supernatural beings own, which is beyond his reach." Then they made him angry, and he let them see a little of the moon, and it became light. Then all of them went to him, and they gave him a great many oligans. Then he again put the moon under his arm, and flying up with it, he sat on the top of a high mountain. He took the moon out and threw it down, so that it broke. Then he threw half of it up and said, "You shall be the moon. Your face shall give light in the night." And he threw up the other half of it and said, "You shall shine in the middle of the day." Then he threw up the pieces and said, "You shall be the stars." And then it was clear, "They shall see you all during the night." So this is an example of the different versions of Raven. So I had previously read you about how the Raven in the Tlingit story had convinced a chief to share his box of daylight. And here is a Masset version that talks about how Raven talks his mother into giving him the moon to play with, and then to also enlarge the smoke hole. So then he flies out of the smoke hole with the moon. And so it's really interesting that the different versions of Raven traveling. But so those are the stories I'd like to share with you about Raven traveling. And I thank you very much for joining me today in watching my weaving and listening to my story and talking about the wefts that will be needed for the weaving project. I also want to talk to you about the ending of this row that I'm doing. I've gotten to the end of this row, and I also want to emphasize that in your project, the 3-strand that will top this background color, in my case it's black, but that 3-strand, it should be a Naheen 3-strand. And I'm going along using a raven's tail 3-strand right here because it goes faster, and there's no reason to take the time to do that extra braid right now where I'm at. So so when you approach the edge, like this is going to be the last warp that I use with this row. So when I'm approaching that edge, all along that I was traveling, I was going behind 2 and up. Here, I'm going to take this action 1. I'm going to go under its partners behind 1 and up. Because again, just like we started, it'll make it tighter and have a better turning, a clean turn. So there I am, grabbing behind 1 warp. And so this one, the last traveling one, is poking up right where I want that row to end. So these stragglers, I move over there to where that other one is, and I bring it to the back. I bring those 2 to the back. And actually, because it was an abbreviated row for me, I'm just going to take all 3 of them to the back, and then I'm going to needle up right there. But I just wanted to show you that when you approach the end, an area where you may, you need a tight ending, then go behind 1, not behind 2. Start going behind just 1 warp, 1 warp, 1 warp, and then it'll give you a nice tight ending or a tight corner. Okay, so I just want to reiterate what I've been saying about the upcoming project. So it's 6 inches, 10 ends per inch for 60 pattern warps, that sizes. The Chilkat book is a really good reference book. It's got some really good illustrations, and so I encourage you to find one of these books and devour it. I again apologize for my sniffling. I hope it wasn't too annoying. And so I thank you again for joining me, and I'm hoping that you are joining me also in the Naheen exercise, because it's a rare art and I really want it to continue. 100 years from now, I hope people are enjoying creating the different designs that they desire in this traditional technique. So, how what?